Welcome to IAS project. In this video, we will be talking about G20. G20 is an intergovernmental forum of 19 countries and European Union. So together they make 20 members. G20 was established in 1999 as finance ministers and central bank governors meeting. In 1990s, the world saw many financial crises like 1994 Mexican peso crisis, 1997 Asian financial crisis, 1998 Russian financial crisis. So due to these crises, which were mainly happening in developing economies or emerging economies, the G7 group or G8 group at the time felt that the developed countries were not sufficient to control and maintain the global economic order anymore. So therefore it was felt necessary that emerging countries were also to be included in some other group. So due to this reasoning, the G7 group made a new group called G20 and sent out invitations to other countries which were emerging countries of that time. So since 2008, that is after 2007 financial crisis, summit level meetings of G20 are being held. Summit level simply means that whoever is the highest leader of who holds the position of head of government or head of state attends the G20 meeting. Then it is called as G20 summit level meeting. For example, from India, it would be Prime Minister who will be attending the meeting. From Germany, it would be the Chancellor. From countries like USA, Russia, China, it will be the president of those countries. For example, if we consider Saudi Arabia, which is a member of G20, it will be the king who will be attending the meeting. So whoever is the highest political authority or the head of the government or head of state, he will be attending the summit level meeting. Also in summit level meetings, other leaders will also be attending the meetings. So since 2008, summit level meeting of G20 is being held. During the summit level meetings, other countries can also be invited. Also, international organizations, NGOs, civil society organizations can also be invited, but they are invited as guests. Guests can be permanent or they can be temporary also. Permanent guests who are invited to G20 summit meetings are Spain, UN, World Bank, leaders of ASEAN, African Union, FSB, that is Financial Stability Board, ILO, International Labour Organization, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, IMF, International Monetary Fund, OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, World Trade Organization, and other organizations are invited as permanent guests. Temporary guests can also be invited, and temporary guest invitees are invited by the host countries who are hosting the G20 summit for that year. G20 members together represent more than 80% of world GDP. World GDP is also called as gross world product. G20 members together represent more than 75% of international trade and more than 60% of world population. Let's look at who are the members of G20 once again. Canada, USA, Mexico from North America, Brazil and Argentina from South America, UK, France, Germany, Italy and EU from Europe, Russia and Turkey, if we can consider them in Europe or Asia, Saudi Arabia from Middle East, only South Africa is represented from Africa. India, China, Japan, South Korea, Indonesia and Australia are also members of G20. It is important here to note that countries like Spain are not permanent members of G20. G20 is not treaty based and it has no permanent secretariat and no permanent staff. No formal criteria was involved for inclusion or exclusion of countries when G20 was established. G7 or G8 countries at that time simply invited certain members and made up a list of 20 members. These more or less remained as it is till date. So no new member has been added since 1997. Or no other member who was previously member of G20 was excluded or expelled from this. Membership has not changed since it is formed, that is since 1997. Most important point to remember is that it is not a group of 20 largest economies. For example, if we list the order of world's largest economies, countries like Spain, Netherlands figure out in top 20 economies of the world. However, Spain is not a member and Netherlands is also not a member. Also, if we look in Africa continent particularly, South Africa is a member of G20, but Nigeria and Egypt are not members. Although Nigeria and Egypt have bigger economies and bigger populations compared to South Africa. So G20 economies are not group of 20 largest economies. G20 members include world's major developed as well as emerging economies. What is developed and what is emerging is actually decided by IMF. Primary focus is governance of global economy. However, it also deals with other issues like clean energy, sustainable development, jobs and employment, poverty, taxation issues, tourism, and various other issues. So we can say that the agenda of G20 is very wide. However, its primary focus is on governance of global economy. Ministerial level meetings are attended by finance ministers and central bank governors. Apart from summit level meetings and ministerial level meetings, G20 meetings can also include ministerial meetings like for ministers of trade, ministers of agriculture, ministers of tourism, etc. Let's see how G20 works. G20 decides by consensus. However, its declarations and decisions are not legally binding. G20 does not have a permanent secretariat or permanent headquarters or even permanent staff. G20 has two tracks for its work. The first track is finance track. The second track is Sherpa track. Sherpa in Nepali language simply means guide. You must have heard the word Sherpa during when you read about people climbing Mount Everest. People climbing Mount Everest actually go along with a guide who is called as a Sherpa, who is usually a Nepali. Finance track involves finance ministers and central bank governors of G20 countries. Finance track mainly focuses on monetary and fiscal issues. Sherpa track, however, is involved in wide-ranging discussions and it focuses on wider aspects compared to finance track. Aspects such as political engagement, climate, energy, and other important issues like terrorism, taxation, and other issues are discussed in Sherpa track. G20 Sherpas are actually appointed by member countries. For example, finance minister or central bank governor can be appointed as Sherpa from a country. G20 chairmanship actually works in this manner. 19 countries of G20 are divided into 5 groups and the chairmanship rotates every year between each group. Within a group, countries negotiate for hosting the summit. For example, India's group consists of India, Russia, South Africa and Turkey. So 4 countries make one group which India belongs to. So if it is the turn of India's group, India may negotiate with Russia, South Africa and Turkey if India wants to host a summit. So within a group, countries can negotiate. The chairmanship lasts for 1 year period. As we have already noted that G20 does not have a permanent secretariat or permanent staff, G20 works in such a manner that there is a troika always maintained. This troika ensures continuity. Presidency is supported by a troika made up of current, immediate past and next host countries. For example, if we look at 2022, let's say Indonesia is hosting the 2022 G20 summit. So Indonesia will coordinate with Italy as well as India, who is the next host, that is 2023 host, so that a continuity can be maintained. So every host maintains relations or maintains discussions with the previous host as well as the future host so that continuity for G20 sessions can be maintained. What is the importance of G20? G20 goes beyond G7 and it includes emerging economies. G20 brings together industrialized as well as developing economies. or we can simply say developed economies and emerging economies. Finance track and Sherpa track together provide for a wide range of discussions. G20 members coordinate policy and action. For example, minimum corporate tax, OECD and G20 initiative for base erosion and profit shifting, vaccine initiative during COVID-19 crisis, or certain actions and policy discussions which were happening recently. Civil society can also participate in G20 discussions through a mechanism called as engagement groups. G20 works for sustainable development and inclusive growth. Let's see the criticism of G20. Most important thing is G20 decisions are not legally binding. Therefore, it lacks teeth for action. It cannot enforce its decisions as well as its declarations. Also, many countries see G20 as exclusive club of members. Only 20 members are there. So, more or less 180 members of the world are excluded from G20. Moreover, G20 membership does not have any clear criteria. As we have seen in previous slide, Nigeria and Egypt have higher population as well as higher GDP than South Africa. However, South Africa is a member of G20, but Nigeria and Egypt are not members of G20. Africa is highly underrepresented. Only one country from Africa is represented, that too South Africa, which only has nearly 6 crore of population. But Africa in itself as a continent has almost 130 crore population. So Africa is not properly represented. G20 undermines other treaty-based international organizations. For example, if we see in G20 Osaka summit, which happened in Japan, there was a initiative called Osaka Track which was launched. Osaka Track mainly deals with flow of digital data between countries and certain aspects related to e-commerce. So G20 is actually involving in areas which are actually dealt by the World Trade Organization, which is not good for World Trade Organization as itself, because World Trade Organization is a treaty-based organization and decisions here are taken by consensus. For example, G20 has also been involved in areas where IMF is operating, UN is operating, and World Health Organization is operating. For example, World Health Organization already dealt with many of the aspects like COVID-19 vaccines, but G20 is also involved in issues related to COVID vaccines. Criticism of G20 is mainly received from Global Governance Group. Global Governance Group is an informal grouping of 30 non-G20 countries which oppose G20 grouping as itself on various aspects. For example, Netherlands objects G20 grouping that although it is a larger GDP within the Europe, it is not included. Similarly, Scandinavian countries also object to G20 grouping or G20 grouping membership mainly. G20 was not effective in handling 2007 financial crisis. As we have seen, G20 actually took birth from or because of certain financial crises which were happening in 1990s. So its main role is to prevent happening of financial crisis. But we have seen that G20 has failed during 2007 financial crisis, which it failed to prevent. Let's look at this question of UPSC Prelims 2020. Please read the question. In which one of the following groups are all the 4 countries members of G20? Argentina, Mexico, South Africa and Turkey, Australia, Canada, Malaysia, New Zealand, Brazil, Iran, Saudi Arabia and Vietnam, Indonesia, Japan, Singapore and South Korea. So please answer the question in the comment section below. Please share, like and subscribe IAS project